Tuesday Seventh-day Adventists, a revival of original Adventism and ancient Christianity, presents Escape for Thy Life. Good day, this is Brother Medina for Tuesday Seventh-day Adventist, and please let us start with a word of prayer. Gracious loving Father, be with us and bless us with understanding. Please help us to walk in obedience to your commandments as we understand. In Jesus' holy name we pray, amen. Well, today we want to talk about the value of republicanism. The value of republicanism. And this country celebrates republicanism. But many people do not understand what republicanism is all about. We have a Republic Day celebration, and many people do not understand what a republic is all about. Usually, a republic is equated with a democracy. So when they say we have a republic, they really mean a democracy, because they do not understand what republicanism is all about. There's a famous speech in which Dr. Eric Williams, once Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, tells us about how great a democracy is. But what he is saying describes a republic, because democracy is not the same as republicanism. Democracy is a political method of putting a government in power, and it is the rule of the majority, because the majority puts the government in power. That's a democracy. But republicanism is different. It deals with the remaking of a public on the grounds of rights and freedoms. Yes, my dear people. It means that you are remaking the public by legislation on the grounds of rights and freedoms, and that rights and freedoms will reign supreme in that country. Some countries call themselves republic, but they attack your rights and freedoms. Those are pseudo-republics, not true republics. They have the name republic, but they do not practice republicanism as a form of governance. Yes, my dear people.
September the 24th is coming up in a week time, and that's Republic Day here in Trinidad and Tobago. We're going to be 43 years a constitutional republic, which took place in August 1976. So this is 43 years later. What are we supposed to hold in mind as a republic? What's supposed to think of? A republic is a country that has a form of government that creates a free republic or a free society that allow persons to engage in whatever pursuits they wish to do in their country, whether it's business, recreation, whatever pursuits they are doing or are engaging in, without the interference of the government or any groups to now violate their rights and freedoms. What we're supposed to celebrate is the fact that we have a republican form of government whereby the government respects the rights and freedoms of the people and ensure their protection by law. Section 4, when you look at Section 4 of our Constitution, there's a list of rights and freedoms so stated therein, which is to guarantee their protection. And so, what are we to celebrate? We are to celebrate that fact that we live in a country wherein we can engage in a great variety of practices and pursuits without the interference of our rights and freedoms by government. And that's something that is very valuable to our country, to our people such as us. Yes, there's room for improvements in our constitutional provisions. There's room for upgrade. But so far as it stands, we are at a good point, and as a republic, we the citizens must ensure that our government do not engage in initiatives that interfere with the provisions that guarantee our rights and freedoms, the protections that they should have. What I would like to recommend to the general public is to engage in a deeper understanding of just what are your rights and just what are your freedoms. As a citizen of such a country, we ought to act out our responsibility by getting to know our rights in a much clearer and deeper way, and what are the freedoms that we have been granted by our Creator, so that we could be sure to make sure that the government does not engage in any kind of initiatives to interfere with those provisions. So it is a blessing to us. We, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, may not understand the real value of Republic Day. I would like to recommend to the general citizenship that persons acquire a copy of the Constitution and read the preamble of the Constitution and get to know the principles that constitute the foundation of our republic. Those principles are so outlined in the preamble of our Constitution. This is my recommendation for Trinidad and Tobago. If you want to go further and deeper, I would recommend that you get on the internet and you're going to enter into the area that you're supposed to type in the address on your browser, www.firstfreedomdefense.org. And when you go to that, you're going to go into our website that has a host of materials to give you further information in your understanding of rights and freedoms. How you're supposed to operate, Train your children in the preamble. Schools supposed to follow the constitutional preamble by training students so that students can understand, listen, when you have differences with your classmates and your fellow men, those differences must not translate into violations of the rights and freedoms of others. We ought always to respect that. And that should be our common interests, those rights that we all have, those equal rights that we all have. And that should form the common structure of morality for our country to follow by. So I wish to say to the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, know your rights, defend your rights, exercise them, and always be sure to be vigilant with regards to their protection. We don't have to wait till we have a government that violates them for us to get to know them in greater detail. Now is our opportunity at a time of peace like this for us to get to know, value what God have given you, your rights. And in order for you to exercise those rights, you have 8 personal freedoms. So those freedoms are going to allow you to pursue the exercise and the integrity of your rights. So you have your rights and you also have your freedoms. And those freedoms facilitate the exercise of those very rights. And that's how you're going to enjoy them, by exercising them, because that's how we were created. That when we operate, all our operations really constitute the exercise of the rights that we have. But to do that exercise, God have given us certain dynamic functions: freedom of thought, freedom of belief, freedom of choice, freedom of conscience, freedom of opinions. Those mental functions allow us that if it is I have to build a house, I have to pursue the material, but that whole enterprise is going to begin with an idea, with thoughts. So I have to use the function of freedom of thought to develop what I want to build. And then my freedom is going to allow me to pursue that by acquiring the funding, by following a design that is, I think, will be most functional to me, etc., etc. So we need to really understand the blessing that we have been given by God in the rights that He have created us with, and the freedoms that allow us the exercise of those rights, to exercise those rights. Okay? So Trinidad and Tobago, enjoy Republic Day coming up by getting a greater understanding of your rights and your freedoms. And don't forget, acquire a copy of our Constitution and read the preamble and teach it to your children, to your neighbors, and whosoever you can.
As far as the Bible is concerned, a republic is a government that acknowledges your rights and freedoms as coming from God. To them, it doesn't come from the legislature. It doesn't come from government. It doesn't come from the rule of the majority. It doesn't come from a piece of paper. It doesn't come from human dignity. It comes from God. The essence of republicanism says that you have rights and freedoms that come from God. And since we have rights and freedoms that come from God, it means that we are born with rights and freedoms. Yes, my dear people. Rights are not given by government. The government can't give children rights. The government can't give sodomite rights, because you are born with those rights already given to you by God. Whenever a government takes it upon himself to write a piece of legislation to give a group special rights, that is not rights and freedoms. In our church, we call it provinities, which is provided opportunities by legislation, but they are not rights and freedoms. Anytime a government seeks to give someone rights and freedoms, it means they did not have those rights and freedoms before. And that since they did not have those rights and freedoms before, only now they have rights. So then they were not born with rights. So then they were given rights by government. That whole concept is false and leads to confusion and chaos in any society that seeks to operate that way. Yes, my dear people. In a republic, rights and freedoms are the subject of legislation to protect. But if somebody says, well, I have the right to marry who I want. So if I want to marry a man, as a man, or if I want to marry an animal, that's my right. That's not a right. You're not born with that. God never gave you that. That is a provinity, a provided opportunity by government, and it may be an immoral provinity. Now, if the government interferes with your freedom of speech, and that freedom of speech says you cannot preach against sodomy, you cannot show sodomy to be wrong, what the government is doing is protecting one group of people based on their sexual practices or orientation, as they like to call it. But they would not protect a pedophile. He has a sexual orientation too. They may not protect a person who is practicing bestiality, but he has a sexual orientation too. They may not protect prostitution, but they have a sexual orientation too. They may not protect people who practice incest, but they have a sexual orientation too. You see, legislation must not be made to protect sexual orientation against people being able to preach against it. Because that way, you are imposing a new morality on the moral values of the majority. And that way you go against their freedom of conscience and therefore their religious liberty. This is the reason why this new trend in the world to pass laws to force vaccination upon people, to pass laws to force people to not to speak against same-sex marriages and other immoralities, these things go against your rights and your freedoms. That is anti-republican, and it is called communism. Yes, my dear people. Let us take something as an example here. Jesus faced attacks upon the rights of man. Man has three basic fundamental rights. The right of religious liberty, which is the first right, the right to life, and the right to private property. Those are the three fundamental rights human beings have. And from those rights, he has freedoms also. 8 basic freedoms. Now let us just look at how Jesus faced attacks upon his rights from the dragon. The Bible in Revelation chapter 13 and verse 11 tells us of a power rising up out of the earth with 2 lamb-like horns, and it tells us he spake like the dragon. Now in Revelation chapter 12 and verse 9 we are told the dragon is that ancient serpent called the devil and Satan. So Satan is the dragon. To speak like a dragon is to speak like Satan. When Satan speaks, he always attacks your 3 basic rights. Yes, my dear people. And this is what Jesus himself showed us. After Jesus was baptized, we are told, he went into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil, and he fasted 40 days and 40 nights. And then the devil came unto him and told him, if thou be the Son of God, change these stones into bread. What was the devil attacking here? Jesus' right of private property. Why? Because if Jesus were to doubt that he was the Son of God, he could not make bread to feed himself when he was so terribly hungry. So the devil attacked his right to private property. Bread is the best symbol you can get of private property, because when you eat it, it becomes part of your body and your body alone. So bread is the best symbol of private property. And here we are told that the devil first attacked Jesus' private property rights. This is the least of the rights, but the devil always come in an inverted way. The next thing he did was to attack Jesus' right to life. Yes, my dear people, the Bible tells us that he took Jesus and carried him upon a pinnacle of the temple, and then told him, if thou be the Son of God, cast yourself down, because it is written, he will give his angel charge over thee, and they will bear thee up, lest thou dash thy foot against a stone. So Jesus was to prove that he was the Son of God to Lucifer by throwing himself off the temple. How foolish. But what does this mean? It means that had he jumped, he would have died. So Lucifer attacked Jesus' right. Lucifer attacked Jesus' right to life. And the greatest right he saved for last. He attacked Jesus' right to religious liberty. The Bible tells us again he took Jesus on top an exceeding high mountain, most likely Mount Everest, and showed him the kingdoms of the world, and told him, all this will I give unto thee, if thou would but fall down and worship me. So what did he attack? Jesus' religious liberty right. He attacked Jesus' right to worship God. And this is the chief right that he put last. So in other words, what do we have here? We have 3 basic rights. The right of religious liberty, the right to life, and the right to private property. And Lucifer attacked all with Jesus. The dragon attacked Jesus on the basis of his rights and freedoms. What does this mean? It means speaking like the voice of the dragon is speaking against your rights and freedoms. And that's what Karl Marx said in his book Communist Manifesto. He and Friedrich Engels clearly says communism abolishes all rights and all freedoms. So communism is a political system that abolishes your rights and freedoms by placing it into the hands of a government who could regulate it and direct it. So republicanism and communism are 2 opposite poles. They are 2 different types of doctrines, political doctrines. Republicanism says your rights and freedoms are God ordained, and the role of government is just to protect those rights and freedoms. Communism says your rights and freedoms are given by man, by legislation, by the will of the majority, or by human dignity, and it is to be regulated by government and can be taken away. So to celebrate a republic is a wonderful thing. It is to celebrate that your rights and freedoms come from God, that they were given to you by God from your birth. That's what you are celebrating, and that's a good thing. It is to say that your rights and freedoms are supposed to be inalienable or unalienable, coming from outside of man, coming from God, and they are inviolable, which means they are not supposed to be attacked by man. They're supposed to be protected. That's what you're actually saying. So when you celebrate Republic Day in Trinidad and Tobago, you are actually celebrating the rights and freedoms that God gave to you. And this is the reason why we always make our appeal to government. People have been asking for the sedition law to be removed, and the government has indicated that they would have to replace it, if they do, by a form of hate speech. But what is hate speech? It is speech that judge a person's hate. They make laws to judge your mental attitude. That isn't right. You can make laws to deal with sedition, but you're not supposed to make laws to deal with robbing a person of free speech. Some people say the sedition laws rob a person of free speech. If the speech encourages murder, if the speech encourages death to other people, those speech are not free speech, but they are incitement to murder. And incitement to murder is going against your right to life. And that is the reason why that is not free speech. So the point is that we are asking the government, let it never be said of Trinidad and Tobago that if you preach against sodomy, it is hate speech. If you preach against same-sex marriages, it is hate speech. If you preach against transgenderism, it is hate speech. And much of those human rights commissions in Canada and in certain parts of the United States go against your free speech, go against your rights and freedoms by seeking to protect certain practices that people have that are immoral. These things ought not to be done. This is anti-Republican. So if you appreciate Republicanism, then stand for your rights and freedoms as being inalienable or unalienable and inviolable, which is what the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago stands for. We know that some people say, well, no freedom is entirely free. If it is attacking other rights and freedoms, it is not free. Because equality in rights and freedoms must exist. But when a person who wants to marry a man as a man says that he needs marriage equality, that is not equality. The very marriage itself is equal, like if it is a male and female. It's not equal to a heterosexual marriage. And he cries equality. But if you speak against it, then they say you are going against equality. You see, once it takes away your free speech, that is not equal. And this is the reason why that government must not allow itself to be caught in these traps, pushed by the UN and pushed by organizations affiliated with the UN. These things are seeking to push global socialism, which will lead this world into a state of horrible destruction. So may we follow true republicanism, not false republicanism, not the claim of being a republic, but not being so by the treatment of rights and freedoms. So may God bless us all as we follow rights and freedoms, as we live republicanism. In Jesus' holy name, Amen.